this is it. That's all right, I don't mind. So thanks for kind of making out. I don't know, how many went on the cruise last night? Yeah? Yeah, exactly. That was pretty good. Oh, there's a few more people coming. Okay. Come on in. Don't sit over there. Come in here. Come on. Yeah. So this, I don't know if anyone here saw my talk last year. The main difference is that I now actually have a HoloLens. It's like, hey, hooray. This talk is more about all the bits you need to know as a developer and less about shiny stuff, although we will have a bit of a play with it, of course. So this is kind of what I want to go through. The first thing is that I'll assume that you know some about it, but not everything. I'll just do a quick sort of recap. We're going to look at Holo Toolkit, which I should have uploaded this slide because it changed name 2 days ago. We'll get to that. We're going to look at some gestures, kind of more in depth of how do gestures actually work and what are they. Voice commands, the same, also about designing voice commands, designing spatial audio. Spatial mapping is something that is often kind of skimmed across and not really, it's kind of taken for granted, so we'll talk a bit more about that. And then something about testing, because no one gives any notice to testing whatsoever. If you do have questions, please just raise your hand, and I'm happy to take questions at any time. If I don't know it, I'll say I don't know it, or if I'll tell you to wait a bit or whatever. But please just ask questions, all right? The more interactive we make this, especially with a small group, like the more you're going to get out of it. So, if you are so inclined, there will be more information on Twitter, on my account, as we go through the presentation. So through the magic of internets, there will be some live tweeting. Hello. So the quick overview. So has anyone here played with a HoloLens? I know a few people. Yeah, okay, cool. This is actually Stephen's HoloLens because I didn't have to bring mine then. So I know you've. Did anyone see Stephen's talk yesterday on the object recognition and stuff? Yeah, no? Okay, a couple of people. All right. So quick overview. There's basically 5 pillars of HoloLens development that you need to be aware of. The first one is gaze. Gaze is, you can kind of compare it to your mouse cursor, but you use your head, right? So it's a little bit odd. So where you point the device, not where you look, it's not eye tracking, it's where you point your head is where your mouse cursor is, and that's called gaze. That's how you interact with things, and one of the ways you can. So if you want to point and click, essentially, at something, you use your head to point at things. Gaze is one of the 3 ways that you can provide input to the HoloLens, and it's probably the most common way that people start out using a HoloLens, because it's very intuitive. Like you have a white dot in front of you, and you just use it like that. Gestures. So gestures is, there is essentially 2 gestures, and that's it. There's this, which is ready, and then there's press. That's kind of it. And then you can combine that into different things, hold and navigate and stuff. But we'll get to that. And then you have the bloom, which is like this. And this is sort of your catch-all. If you're in an app, you'll exit. If you're out of an app, you'll pull up the start menu. And you can't override that as a developer. That's just how it is, right? So those are the 2, right? That's it. There are only those 2. You can use voice. So that's the 3rd way. So you've got gaze, gestures, and then voice, GGV. Voice is pretty damn accurate. Like the voice recognition on this device is very, very impressive. Often people get a wrong impression because the emulator that we'll look at uses the PC mic for voice commands, obviously, whereas this thing has an array of microphones in front of you, and it's really, really good. Like it's very accurate. Voice is, well, it's really easy to use, really, really hard to get right. So we'll look at a few more ideas as well later on. And then you have sound. So we're talking about spatial sound. And spatial sound is kind of like 3D sound, right? So this device has 2, well, 4 speakers actually, but 2 on either side. These red things here, they sit just above your ears. And the whole idea is that as a developer, you just kind of almost drag and drop the sound onto the object you want it to follow in Unity. We'll look at Unity in a second. And this makes it really, really easy. Like the whole spatial sound concept is kind of taken care of for you, but you need to still have good sound design, which is what we'll look at as well. And excuse me, the sound. So the idea, the idea is that this is supposed to mimic real life, right? The more realistic this device can make it, the more likely you are to accept the experience as being mixed reality, as being real. And the holograms that you'll see will have sound attached to them. So if I put it on, right, and there's a hologram over there, it'll appear as though the sound is coming from over there. And as soon as I turn my head, the sound will be in front of me. It's super accurate, right? It's very, very convincing, and it has to be, because we're trying to convince people that there are more things than what there really is, right? So it needs to be quite real. And then, of course, we've got spatial mapping, which is, we'll go into much more detail on that. But spatial mapping is the fifth pillar, well, I call them pillars, but it's what makes HoloLens HoloLens. Without spatial mapping, you would not have a HoloLens. It's the way that you 3D map the room using infrared and UV on these little cameras that sit up here. And no, it's not real time, unfortunately. So you can have these funny effects that we'll get to, but it is pretty damn close. And it's all about battery life, I would imagine. That's why it does it at the frequency that it does it. But it scans the room. About 5 meter distance, so you will need to walk around a room like this size. You would need to walk around for a bit to scan the whole room. All right, so any questions on this? Does this kind of make sense? That was like really quick, right? Those are the pillars. Those are the fundamentals of building a mixed reality experience. And to a large extent, a VR experience as well, except for the spatial mapping. So I do have the updated name here because Microsoft, everything changes name all the time, right? So now it's Windows Mixed Reality is the platform, and it's still called a HoloLens, but it runs mixed reality. And it used to be called the Holo Toolkit because it was for HoloLens. Now it's called the Mixed Reality Toolkit. It's still the same thing, but they have said that they will be breaking everything with namespace changes, which is just, yeah, okay. I can understand they're doing it because it's got to be, we'll get to this thing as well later on. But there's going to be many more devices. You can't just call Holo everything because it might not be. So that's why they're doing it. Anyway, it's on GitHub. There's 2 versions. There's a Unity version, which is really easy to kind of plug into your Unity project, which is probably the one that most people use. And then there's a non-Unity version, which is the Unity version is just kind of wrapping this version on the right here. Essentially, the Holo Toolkit is just that. It's a bunch of tools, and it's a whole bunch of scripts. It gives you some shortcuts for starting a new project, which we'll look at in just a second. And it has a bunch of demos as well, some testing scenarios. The demos tend to not follow the evolution of the toolkit, so they do break, which is kind of annoying. But it's getting better. Like, they're getting better at updating it over time. What else was I going to say? So the mixed reality toolkit, or the Holo Toolkit, which is still what most people will call it, has come from 2 projects in particular. So there are 2 games. One's called Fragments, and the other one's called Young Conquer. Has anyone tried Fragments? I know a couple of people obviously have. Are you shaking your head? No, I have never tried it. You have not tried Fragments? Wow, okay, that's cool. No, that's good. So these 2 projects were kind of like the showcases from Microsoft to say, hey, look at the HoloLens, how freaking awesome it is, right? So I'm assuming that's poured a ton of money in this. It's done by a Paris-based development house called, oh God, I can't remember now, Abozo, I think, something. And Fragments is a mind detective game. And the reason it's so effective for the HoloLens is that you are this persona that can see fragments of people's memory, right? So these fragments are placed in whatever room you're in. So the first scene, for example, there's a hole in the roof and water's coming in. Like, so you look up and there's a hole in the roof and you can see the sky through it. There's a window on the wall suddenly and there's things going past the window outside. Like, it really is very immersive, very, very convincing. And you can do that because you scan the room. You've got spatial mapping, right? You can place things everywhere and it works in every room. I tried it just for fun in the world's smallest hotel room I've ever been in London. Like, it didn't even fit the bed almost. Like, 2 sides, you couldn't go around the bed. And it still worked. Like, it still found places to place the holographic characters and everything. And in order to do that, so Young Conquer is very much the same. I don't know if anyone ever played the Sega game, Conquer? Okay, I'm just old. But it's a little squirrel guy, this guy. And he collects coins and does things. But in this case, he jumps around your living room. So he jumps on your furniture, and he jumps on your table. He goes behind everything. And in order to do these projects, they developed a bunch of tooling to facilitate it, such as I need to know what a wall is. I need to know what a floor is. How do I know that it's a couch so I can have someone come in and sit on the couch next to you? And all of these tools were then put into this Holo toolkit, and they open sourced it and put it on GitHub. And it is still run by Microsoft, but it's very much a community project. There's a lot of MVPs that contribute to it all the time, submit pull requests for bug fixes, all that sort of stuff. So it's very, very alive and well. And you almost can't build a new app without using the Holo toolkit because there's so many shortcuts in it. So there's my first tip of the day. It comes, I just found out, it now has an official logo. It was very exciting because it was just a community project, right? But it has input, so it scripts that allows you to create input very easily, almost like kind of drag and drop again. And it plugs it into an input manager and a hand gesture manager and all this sort of stuff that allows you to do all the fun stuff and not having to worry too much about wiring up events and all that. Sharing libraries, I won't go too much into sharing today, but it's an interesting concept because this is part of the business proposal of this, is that, hey, if you get 8 of them or 4 of them, you can collaborate on the same experience, right? So the sharing experience gives you a server-side component that you can just run on your laptop. But it acts as a server. And then everybody connects via the network to that server, and you have a shared experience. It's actually relatively easy to set up. It probably takes half an hour or something to get it going. But these libraries just give you that shortcut again. Spatial mapping, that's what I was talking about. You can recognize walls and doors. Yeah, I think you can do doors now as well. Walls, ceilings, couches as well, which is like, oh, there's a flat surface with another flat surface. So that's a couch. You can place things on it. Spatial understanding, that's kind of the same what I just talked about. Spatial sound, have we talked about? UI control, so a bunch of controls like the cursor, or like if I look at something, the cursor changes to something else, so it's a visual clue that the user's looking at something. Utilities, tons of helpers. Like I don't know how many scripts are in the Holo toolkit, but I don't know, a couple of hundred, 300 maybe? I don't know, there's tons, there's a lot. And there's some build automation stuff, if you get to that point of having to automate your builds. All right, questions on the Holo toolkit? Really? All at once, okay.
Is there such thing as mapping the room prior to actually wearing the device? So could you map a room before, load it in later?
Yep. So the question is, can you pre-map a room and then essentially load it onto whatever you need it to? Short answer, yes, and I'll get to that more of that not long actually, and we'll just have a talk about that as well. But I want to show you the Holo toolkit. See, I still have hasn't been updated all of it. The mixed reality toolkit. So I've cheated a little bit because you can go in to, maybe not. Click, there we go. A good friend of mine has this Holo toolkit, does AzureWebsites.net. Jimmy Engström in Sweden. And it's just a wrapper around it, and you can just kind of get your Unity package with one click. So he has an automated build process that takes the GitHub projects and wraps it up, and it does what's called a Unity package, .unity package. So you just download that. It's 120 meg, I think, currently. And we'll get to that in a minute. So in here, what happens is that you go to Assets. I can't, unfortunately, make that any bigger, so I hope you can still see it. You go to Custom Package here, and you just find your Holo toolkit Unity package, right? And then you install that. That's all you need to do. And I won't do it now because it takes a few minutes and it's kind of boring looking at. But what happens is that you get this menu up here. So you now have an extra menu in Unity that's relating to your Holo toolkit, your HoloLens project with using the mixed reality toolkit. And the menu still says Holo toolkit as well. So yeah, it's just going to be a few weeks of both names. But what you can do here, that is, so has anyone used Unity? A few people, okay. Anyone does game design? Gaming, that sort of stuff? No? Ish? Yeah, I know you've dabbled with it, there you go. But it's, like if you do that, you've got an advantage, right? Because Unity is kind of where you do everything. So this is not a Unity talk because I'm certainly not an expert in Unity. It's daunting because you get all these things, and I usually just tell people just ignore everything and find out what you need because there's so many things that come up there. But there are things that you need to do, such as you have to have a black background because black is what becomes transparent so that you can see the room around you with holograms on top of it, right? You need to set what's called the clipping pane. At what point do you not render holograms when you walk up to them? Like that distance needs to be different because you don't want holograms here. That's very, very annoying. They're right in your face and won't go away. So if you're within, say, 85 centimeters, they disappear, right? It's just a feature that comes as part of the framework. But all those things that you have to do every single time you start a new project, you can just do in here with configure. So you got HoloLens scene settings. Move camera to origin because the camera is your face, that's your eyes. Always has to be a 000, which is the origin in Unity. Clear the black that we talked about. Update the clipping plane. Update field of view so that everything looks like it's real, like you don't get skewed or anything. And you just click apply, and it all just goes blong, right? Because otherwise you have to remember this every time, and you go and you go click there, and change this. And this just, it takes 5 seconds and you're done. The same with the actual, with the project settings. You got to target the Windows Store because it's a Windows 10 app, right? It runs on Windows 10. This is a Windows 10 device. It has to be built for Direct 3D, possibly. That's usually the way it's done. Set quality to fastest so we don't get lag and all that stuff. Enable VR. All these things you have to do with a new project you get for free. So you just use that whenever you start a new project. And then you have all these scripts down here and plugins and prefabs. Prefab is a collection of things that Unity uses. So that could be scripts and scenes and characters and anything that is in Unity. You can build into a prefab and distribute and say, hey, oh, you want this dude that does this thing? Here's my prefab for that, right? All right, that's all I was going to show for the whole toolkit. Questions on that? No? It is like, please do not start a project on HoloLens without using HoloToolkit because you're just going to sit in a corner and rock. Having said that, I do run a workshop where I make everybody do this manually and then tell them about HoloToolkit. So just because. Oh, yeah. Can't be nice all the time. So next thing's gestures, right? Gestures is what people see because you go around like this, like an idiot, all the time, right? And you get pretty sick of it, which is why they supply a clicker for it, so you just click. But gestures is really easy to implement. I often get the question of, can I do my own gestures? I'm sure some of you are thinking that. But no, well, you can. You can actually do that. There is a way, it's in the mixed reality toolkit as well, where you can get the kind of raw data for gestures and you can model your own gestures-ish. But please don't. Like, there's 2 reasons. One is that everybody expects to be able to do tap and hold and manipulate and the bloom, right? So if you start doing your own gestures, well, for one, they're only going to be in your app. And how are people going to know about it? Like, it becomes a disjointed experience for the platform. And that's the reason there are only those simple gestures. Well, simple. The other reason that it's so hard to do accurately. You need some sort of almost natural learning mechanism to just go through and actually create the gesture, right? It's really, really not easy. All right. So we talked about the tap. Tap, 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 tap. There's also hold. So you hold onto something. And that is an event that triggers as well. We can do manipulation. So manipulation is that you actually hold on something and you can move it in vertical or horizontal space, and it kind of snaps to it. Or you have navigation, which is in a 3D space. So you hold on something again, and you can sort of move things in 3D space. And that's usually what people use for moving things around. So you hold on something, and then you move it over here. So those are the advanced or the extended gestures that you get. Yes?
If you use clicker, how do you do all the gestures?
Sorry?
If you use a clicker,
Yeah.
how do you do this gestures like hold and drag and all this stuff? Is it possible or not?
So the question is, how do you use the clicker, which is somewhere, anyway. It's just a little thing like this kind of thing. You just click it, right? It does have like a gyroscope type thing in it, so you can't do navigation, but you can do manipulation up and down and to the sides. So you can scroll on a website with clicking and scrolling. And that works. So almost, not quite everything. Anyone else? No? All right, so I'll just show you quickly here what we got. So we have a little project here. So this is from the HoloLens Developer Portal, or the HoloLens Developer Academy. And I use these because you can just go and download them. Right? You can just go and you can grab this code, how it looks, and have a look at it on yourself. But the solution, in case you're interested, come on. You can see it says Universal Windows there, Universal Windows. It's a Windows 10 app, right? And that's the reason that we can run it on the on the HoloLens, as well as if it was you can run 2D apps on the HoloLens as well, which means you can have your mobile app running on the HoloLens. So I believe Office 2016 now runs on HoloLens as well. So as a developer, you need to tick the little mixed reality checkbox when you build it and when you submit it. But that's almost all you have to do. And there's no reason you can't run 2D apps on it. I think that would probably be a feature of it. Like it won't all just be fun and games and holograms necessarily, because you can carry everything with you on your head type thing and overlay it and whatnot. So we'll see where that ends up. But you get here a gesture recognizer, which is what we use to figure out what the gesture is, and that listens for the gestures. And there's a few different ones here because they're doing some fancy stuff, smart things. You hook them up here, just like, the point of showing this is that it's not scary. Like if you've done any C# development, this should look pretty damn normal, right? We're just hooking up an event and with an event handler, and that's all we're doing. And you can see here that we have a tapped event there. We have a navigation started, navigation updated, and so they just come for free. Like again, you don't have to build gestures. You just have to handle them. And that's the key, is that as a developer, this is not hard, right? It's not the scary bit. If we then, I'll just start this up because it might just take a second. I'll just show you the emulator as well. Cool. All right. So they've built this guy called Astroman. If you saw the first slide, he was kind of hovering there in the living room. And the idea with Astroman is to showcase these things and how do you use them. Now, the Holo Toolkit does give you some of the shortcuts so that you don't have to do as much plumbing as they do. But it's good to know how that works underneath the covers. This is always interesting, see if the emulator will work. So that's the other thing. If you're developing for HoloLens, you don't need a physical HoloLens. You can use the emulator, which is as close to as you get to having a physical device. Obviously, it's more fun with a physical device. You don't quite get the same sensation as when you're wearing the headset, but it is really, really good. It's a Hyper-V instance, so you do need to run Windows 10 Pro or Enterprise, I think it is, in order to run the emulator. And this is not start. Oh, there we go. Maybe. Looking for this little thing down here that should say deploy. There, it just says ready. There we go, it's starting up. Hey, so this is kind of what you'll see. I'll show you what it looks like through the lens as well. But here we go, this is your start menu. And something went bang, as they always do. There were deployment errors. Probably a timeout is what I'm guessing. Yeah, so we'll just do it again. Yeah, the emulator takes a little while to start up. But I think it crashed just before I started the talk. That's what I'm guessing. It does come with its own network, its own IP, its own everything. It's just a Hyper-V instance. It is a VM, essentially, that runs it. So, deploy. Come on. Have we got sound, sir? The sound? Cool. All right. Because I'll use this. Notice the sound design, OK? And then we'll talk more about it when we get to sound. If it ever starts. All right. What else can we say while we wait? Deploy started. I'm hoping this is going to work. The emulator sometimes just gets caught up in networking issues. I don't know if you've had the same experience, Igor. You just got to restart the emulator because it just does not work. And then sometimes this takes a long time. Mainly when I do talks, it takes a really long time. OK, there we go. So now I've deployed it to the device. It would be the same experience as if I hooked this up with a USB and deployed to this, it will be exactly the same, right? There's no different. It thinks, Visual Studio thinks this is just another HoloLens device. So here we go. So I can use the keyboard for this. Unfortunately, I can't make the emulator any bigger because Microsoft. So we're going to have to deal with it like this. Okay. And there is no sound. Why is there no sound? No? I'll just check here. Because, yeah, the sound is kind of interesting in this. No, there's no sound. Oh, I think that the HDMI has taken over the sound. Bear with me for a sec here. Playback devices. Huh? There we go. There we go. Okay. So you get the idea, right? He's in space. Woo, floaty, floaty. It's all pretty. Now, what I wanted to show you, obviously, was with the gestures. So you see there's a little arrow here, little ring with 2 arrows. If I move that around, that's going to start changing. Right? So that becomes something else. That's all that's all in the Holo Toolkit, all this stuff that, you know, you can have different. So if I then press Enter, which is to hold, you can see there's a little hand that comes up. Right, so I'm handling the hold event. Now, if I start moving, so just the arrow keys, in terms of moving this dude around, while I'm holding, he starts turning. Right, so you can do things like that. So now I'm holding, I'm using the manipulation in a horizontal motion to rotate the dude. And the performance is a little bit crap on this, but essentially the further away I move, the faster he spins. And I just kind of hoped he would throw up in his helmet, but no, he never does, because that would have been amazing. I'll let go again. So that's the gestures that you get an idea. But just notice the sound design, right? I can press on them. It's just this ambient right? And if I press this little button on the front here, again, we have different elements that do different things, and there's a heads-up display that comes up, right? So just a little kind of fun example to play with. It's really good if you do want to learn more about this. Do the origami tutorial first, then do this Astro Man, and you're pretty much up to speed on all the fundamentals. All right, so let's see if we can get him to shut up. There we go. So I just pressed the Windows key like you would on the start. There we go, and there's the start menu, right? Okay, so that's gestures. We'll just, yeah. Yep. Any questions on gestures? Okay. Cool. Now voice commands. Go. There we go. Voice commands are, again, super simple. I'm not going to show you how to implement them because it's so trivial. You can use any phrase that you like. So you just make up whatever phrase you want, and that will be your voice command. So you can have, half a novel as a voice command. Probably not recommended. But it is really that simple. And voice commands are really important because a lot of times you do get sick of the whole tapping, right? You tap so much. And voice commands is really, really useful to kind of either provide a shortcut for 6 taps or just let people not tap. And there's some built-in stuff. There's something called see it, say it. So in this case, say it, set removed here. You can just point at it with gaze, so your head, you move the cursor and you point at it and you just say remove. Actually, you just point at the element that has that attached. So if there's a label with an action attached, you can just say the label. So anything you see, you can just say it. Right? And it's really, really handy, and people often forget. It's kind of, you need to learn that. Now, what I really want to talk about is sound or speech design, because as easy as it is to implement, as hard is it to get it right. Like, it's really tricky getting it right. And mainly it's because we don't really consider what we need to do with speech design as a developer. Because, like, what actions can you actually take through speech? Like, what makes sense? Because you can do anything with speech, but does it make sense at the time? Like, what are you actually trying to achieve? What's your end goal with doing this voice command? Is it even a good option for completing a task? Because sometimes it might be better to have people click because they need to know what the intuitive action is that goes with it. Like, there's a cognitive process that happens when you tap on something, right? How does a user know when speech input is available? Like, how do you train your user? What's the education process? How do they know there are these commands that they can say? So yeah, it's easy to implement, but how do they know that that's the command they need to say? Is the app always listening? Because it will be by default, but are there scenarios where you want to ignore this particular voice command? What phrases? So I built this demo through my workshop, which is essentially build some blocks and shoot balls at them, right? And you tap and the ball goes and it impacts on the blocks and they fall off on the floor and stuff. But then we do the voice command, and I always ask people, so what should the voice command be for that? And everybody goes, shoot, which you would think is the good option, but it's too short because depending on dialect and accent and context and what else is happening, shoot's very short. So it might not pick up the exact what you're trying to do. So I always use shoot ball because it provides context. And the speech recognition works much better when you have like a 2, 3, 4 syllable, maybe 2 words action. So just things like that. It makes a big difference. Interaction dialogue, like are you going to have context? Because if you use Cortana, which I'm sure you all do, right? Right. Cortana works on it as well. But things like, hey, what's the best restaurant in the area? And then it shows you to say, take me there. Like you have that context of take me where. And you can do that as well, but you have to implement that yourself with these things. So if you want context of speech, you need to take care of that as well. And then I always do network connectivity because as developers, we always have network connectivity, well, we probably should have. But users might not. They might walk into a Faraday cage. We don't know. So what happens if that's the case? Now, we don't need internet connection for voice recognition or the speech design, but we might need it for the actions that it triggers. So we might want to disable things. All right. Any questions on that? No? Cool. So I was going to just do a quick demo on voice commands. Yeah, I might, because we're just running a little bit over time. So unless you want to, I'll do it when we demo the HoloLens. How about that? Okay. So I want to talk about spatial audio. And we briefly touched it in the beginning. Spatial audio is really, really easy. Like it's really simple. All you need to know is just these things, right? There's nothing else. So, but no, it's using what's called the head-related transfer function, HRTF. And this, I have no idea what this means. It's from Wikipedia. I just copied it, right? Because you don't need to care about it. You don't need to know that this particular formula gives you a beta thing with the other thing. Yeah. This, though, does kind of make sense. So you got left and right here. The head-related transfer function calculates distance and direction and how you should play volume to 2 ears. That's kind of the idea here. So if it's right directly in front of you, the speaker here, well, the sound comes from the front. As the sound moves that way, then this is the listener position and the graph and the numbers and all that. That's how kind of the idea of the head-related transfer function is. But yeah, you don't actually need to know about this. All you need to know about is that there's a pretty picture and it works, okay? Because it's all taken care of for you. So you just attach, you just drag and drop in Unity, say, hey, this sound plays on this object, or encode in a Unity script, hey, attach this sound clip with these properties, whatever it might be. Now, just as with voice, the really, really tricky bit is getting this design right, okay? Because there are many things here that can go wrong as well. So audio design is trying to make sure that we don't annoy the user. So grounding is one of them. Grounding is, real objects have sound that means you know where they are. You want the same for your holograms. You want to ground the object. So you want to make sure that you can hear holograms even when you can't see them, because it becomes a guide for the user as well. As you'll see, you have very little narrow vision of the real world through this with holograms overlaid. You get used to it, but it's not very big. You need audio to guide the user and tell them where to look. So that's one of them, grounding. User attention. So you can use sound to get the user's attention. If there's, say, a clue for the Fragments game or Conker wanting your attention or something, you can get them to emit sound that makes the user turn and gets their attention, right? Immersion, obviously. We want to make sure that people, the sounds are as realistic as we possibly can make them. So a bird sounds like a bird, or a tree sounds, wind and trees sounds like wind and trees. Because if it's not real, the whole idea of mixed reality kind of goes out the window. And obviously, with a game like Young Conquer, there's going to be sounds that are not that realistic, but they're realistic in the context of a game. Okay? But yeah, please make sure that your audio design is as natural as possible and as less intrusive as possible, because that makes the immersion much more effective. And obviously, user interaction design. So we're talking about how do you interact with the audio. The audio needs to be, because we don't have any tactile feedback, when you tap on a button, well, give it a sound so that people know, yeah, I clicked on it. Something happened. So you need to use audio for that as well. So all this is really easy to implement, but it's really tricky to get right, because there's a lot of design ideas that you need to kind of consider, especially with audio. Because as we just saw with Astro Man, that background music thing is just annoying. Like after a minute or two, you just go, just shut it up. Just get rid of it. And the other origami example in the HoloLens developer is the same. It has this Chinese kind of background music that just loops and just plays and plays and plays. So be careful with having too much sound as well. All right. Yeah, just some audio tips. Gaze mixing. Make sure that you use audio in with gaze, so you look at things and you use the audio for feedback. Audio haptics, we talked about that. You click on a button and it actually gets audio feedback. And then immersion as well. Ambient sounds, I find hard. So be careful with ambient sounds. Like just once-off sounds are fine because they go away. But yeah, the ambient one. Okay. This is the fun bit, spatial mapping. So spatial mapping is very much a integral part of the product or the platform that we don't actually ever really notice much. Like it just becomes part of the experience, right? But it's so important to understand how it works and how to use it, because that's the way that you create what's not a VR app. But we don't want to create just virtual reality stuff or just augmented reality stuff. We want to use the spatial mapping that you create. So this is kind of what the representation is. Bunch of triangles. It's all triangles. Lots and lots and lots and lots of triangles that creates a 3D model. How accurate is it? Okay. If you map this, it would probably just come up like kind of a blob, but accurate enough so you can place things on it, and you can. I think there's a way that you can sort of dial up the accuracy or the details, but I haven't found a good use case for it yet. I don't think you need that much more detail. It's probably going to have some performance hits as well. So there's 4 different kind of areas of spatial mapping. Placement, we want to be able to place things. Like we want to be able to put our Netflix window on the wall and resize it. Like we want to be able to know where we can put stuff. Where can this holographic person go in and sit next to you? Placement is kind of the most fundamental of these things that users are after, because if you place a hologram through the wall, it just loses the whole idea of the mixed reality experience. Occlusion is a really nice fancy word of saying hiding stuff. So you need to be able, like Conker will walk behind your furniture and under your table. And to have that illusion real, you need to be able to hide him when he walks behind a couch, right? Like he is walking behind the couch. And then in Conker's place, it just kind of fades out, so you can still kind of see where he is, because otherwise you're going to run around looking for him. But things need to be able to go and interact with your furniture and your environment as is. And that also means physics. If I place something on a table and it kind of knocks over, and it needs to be a realistic physics attached to it, right? If things start floating off or having this ragdoll effect or something, it just takes away from the realness of the whole thing. And then navigation, of course. The spatial mapping allows virtual characters to navigate your space, which is very convincing. When that works, it really works. Okay, I want to show you the developer portal though, which is part of, there we go, this should be quicker. So the developer portal is what comes for free with the HoloLens. Oh, okay, there we go. So in here, all you do is just click on this little thing in the emulator. It says Open Developer Portal. I'll click on that. And it opens up a new browser window. And this works the same way on the device. And I'll show you that in just a sec. So this gives you a bunch of tools, like a whole bunch of tools that you can use. Usually the kind of fun thing is this 3D view. Oops. 3D view. So you can So in here, I can update. And now this is the emulator's representation of the space. Now, there was a question before, can you preload and can you record rooms? This is exactly what that is. So I can change the room on the emulator here. Just go these tools here. Oops, there we go. So in here, the room, and you can actually load more rooms. There's some that comes default on the emulator. There's 5 of them here. But you can also record your own. I've recorded my living room at home in quite some detail. I spent about 15 minutes walking around just mapping everything. And then you can then reload that. So that means that if you are multiple developers on a project, you can have, say you have a test room, you map that, and then everybody can get the recording of that mapping and load it into the emulator, which makes it much quicker. So yes, you can do that. And in here, you can see, oh, I'll just, hang on. So we'll make sure you can see both at the same time here. Hang on. So in here, as I move, you can see that moves as well. If I turn and go forwards and backwards, that moves as well. I can probably do a little bit better there. So, come on. There we go. So as I move around the room, even though I can't see anything, because remember black is transparent, so that's where the actual room should be, it still gives me that representation of it there. Okay, so that's the spatial mapping you can see there. Now, yes, Igor.
Can you record your room on HoloLens and then reload to different HoloLens device so it won't spend time on mapping this room with record, or it's only for...
So can you load it onto another physical device? I don't think you can. Yeah, I'm not. You can have it as part of your app somehow. You can have, yeah, I'm not sure how that would work.
Because if you have a big room or big house, I can take one device, go around, digital mapping. Now, I don't want to spend another half a day in different device and have to reload it to...
Yeah, so it's the same thing. Can you preload a room recording, a 3D model onto a physical device? I would have thought there would be a way to do it. But I'm not sure, to be honest. I actually don't know, because I only have one device. So it's never been a problem. OK, I'll just close down the emulator here, because we're not going to use that anymore. And then fire up this thing, because I know that's why you're here, really. And woo, I go back to here. And there you go. So see, I'm moving my head in real time, right? So I've cheated a little bit. So if I click update, it should have already mapped bits of it. OK, not much. Little tiny bit. All right, so if I just move down here, and I just tap on you guys, don't worry, it won't hurt much. Tapping forces it to map it, right? So it's kind of mapping as I tap it. All right, so I'll just tap the front row here. Do you like that? Yeah, no. Click update, and you can see it's updated here, and there's people in the front row, right? So that's the kind of level of detail. It's pretty good. All right, and then you can obviously see here, as I move, that's going to move with me. So if I look at you guys, it's going to know exactly where I am. So that's kind of neat, and that's the spatial mapping in action. Right? And then it now knows that there's a surface there, and there's some chairs there, and you can use those. Actually, the HoloLens doesn't know that at all. It just knows there's a mapping. But you can use the whole toolkit and other functions to know where those things are, so you can use them in your app. Cool. Does that make sense? Yeah? Spatial mapping? Good to know about. Really easy to use. It really is the core thing of the whole platform that you kind of get for free. All right. So I am going through this kind of quick, because there's lots of things I wanted to talk to you about. OK, make sure I got here. All right. So usually this kind of gets people testing, really? But testing a HoloLens app is not like testing your iOS app. It's quite different. yes, it's a Windows 10 app, and you have code, you have business logic probably that you can test. But to be honest, it's a bit cumbersome, and unit testing doesn't really work on it. So instead, we have what's called environmental testing, which is obviously very specific to this device. Like nothing, like you wouldn't have an environmental testing necessarily on your Android app. You just have lots of sleepless hours of testing 42,000 devices. So you want to go through this kind of list, whatever's appropriate to what you're trying to do. But because you probably have the same room that you're going to test in all the time when you build your app, this is a good sort of shopping list. So what if you have a really dimly lit room? Like, what if you change the light, to all, party light? Does it still work? What about like doorways and curved walls? What happens if you place a thing on a curved wall? If that's what you're meant to do in your app, placing things on walls, what happens if it's like a curve? Because it's going to look like it's hanging kind of off the wall, or are you going to bend it, or what are you going to do, right? Those sort of test scenarios are much more valuable than what we traditionally think of as testing when we're developers. Especially this one, user movement. This is it's kind of like text box that you have on your website. You don't know what the user's going to enter, and they will enter, snot82 alert _ comma or something, right? You just don't know. So until you try it, and because it tracks everything with head movement and body movement and everything, where is things going to be? And what happens if you tap on something and you move your head? Or like all these things that you could imagine a user might do, even though you kind of go, no one will ever do that, but they will. Physical environment, because you don't control that, right? Sure, you have your test environment, but once it's out in the wild, people will download and use it wherever. So you need to kind of test for all these. I like this one. But stairs. How do you deal with stairs? Because that's really tricky, right? Is it a surface or is it not? And what happens if you go up and what? Yeah, they're interesting things to test. And there might be things here that are not relevant, that don't matter. But there's your list for it. And then there's the other thing that I really, I quite like this. It's called perception simulation. This is kind of like your unit test. So perception in this case is what the user is perceiving. What are they seeing? And we simulate movement and actions that the users can do. And it's quite easy to do, actually. Oh, I closed the emulator, didn't I? OK. So while I fire up the emulator again, apologies for that. Deploy. I'm just going to have a look here. So this, again, perception simulation. It's a newish library, probably 6 months old now, that Microsoft has done because they need to understand how. What's really hard is that you can't do the same action as a human twice. You can't do an identical motion twice in a row. It's just not possible, right? Even you think your head is still, it's actually slightly bobbing. Like it's just how we are as humans, how we keep the balance, how we move. So what you can do is that you can set up these steps. So in this case, he's going there. No, I haven't got an IP yet. I'll just put the IP in here in a minute. We've got these steps here. So we get this perception simulation manager .create perception simulation manager thing. And that gives us this manager that we can do things with. And this works with the physical device as well. It will override whatever you're doing as a person and simulate it on the device as well, which is kind of weird. But it works on that as well. It's easier to see with the emulator. So in here, we just have this manager, and we just say, human do an action such as, oh, there we go. I'll just get the IP. Network. Rip. So that's all we do to hook up to it. In here, we just add the IP. And go. There you go. So now we have a connection to it. And with the emulator, there's no login or anything, right? It's just anonymous login. If you're doing it on a device, you might have to provide credentials. And what we can do is that in this case, we have perform gesture, perform gesture. So that's the home, which is the bloom, right? So we do that twice. We then, whoa, okay then. There we go. We then rotate our head. Then we perform another gesture. We press and we release. That's a tap. And then we tap again. And then we rotate the head again. These are just, you might have a different scenario, obviously, for what you want to look at and what you want to press and whatnot. And then we do a tap again and we do home. Right. Very simple, basic example. So what I now can do is I can make sure this is still running. Put that over here. If I start this, it comes up with a little console. Give it a second, just build it. And then this has a connection to the emulator, because again, the emulator is just a VM. And here we go. And it then performs those actions on it. So I'm not touching anything, right? And go. Oh, it's starting up again. All right. Let me just try that again, because it was asleep. There we go. Let's do it again. Be quicker the second time. Okay. So again, I'm not touching anything, right? And here we go. So we're going to, why does it do that? This is the demo gods, right? What you would see is that it would put up the start menu. It would then move and tap. And when it taps, it brings up the grid again there.
Can you redeploy your follow-on? I think it was deployed.
That's all right. I don't need to deploy anything. I just need the emulator to come up. So I'm not sure why it's doing this right now. Anyway. It runs those perception simulation actions onto the emulator, right? And it moves it around. And you're not doing anything, but does the exact same action every time. Rotates the head the same way. It presses at the same time. It does everything. And you can just redo that over and over and over again. It's really powerful. And you can set up a bunch of them. And you can automate them if you wanted to. Not quite sure how that would work with the emulator. But yeah, there's ways with the whole toolkit, mixed reality toolkit, that you can automate these things as well. Any questions on testing? Yes? Good question. So how do you verify that the test you just did what you wanted it to do or not? You would have to build something into your app, a log or something, I would imagine. There isn't that kind of feedback yet. It just does actions. So if you knew that after a minute your app should be doing this or whatever, you would have to build that in and time it and log it somehow and then check those logs. But it is a step in the right direction of providing some sort of test framework. Because obviously it's new. No one's ever done testing for it before. So. Anyone else? No? Cool. And now I don't need the emulator anymore. Now we can shut it down. Okay. So you may have noticed that I had this thing lying here, and I haven't talked about it at all. There's a good reason for that. So this is an Acer headset, and as you probably can tell, you can't see through it, right? This is still Windows 10 mixed reality, so it's still the same kind of platform as HoloLens. But this is essentially the next step or evolution of devices. It is kind of a VR experience because you have a headset on, you can't see the real world, but it still has the environmental cameras and it still tracks the room for you, so you still get the spatial mapping, but it's then projected inside of the VR experience. And this thing here is $3,000 US. This is $400. Right, it's a massive difference, which is why they're coming. Problem, as you may have noticed, tethered. There's a massive long cable for it. Problem number 2 is that I don't have a computer that can run it. So I got this headset a week and a half ago, and I don't actually have a machine with a graphics card that's powerful enough to run it. So that's another kind of barrier for it. Hopefully that may change as the platform evolves, but currently I need to go and talk to friends about, hey, can I use your computer for a bit? I just thought I'll bring it up and mention it, because there are more of these coming. Lenovo's doing one, Dell's doing one, HP has one for sale right now on their HP website in the US. I think you can buy this as a dev kit through the Microsoft Store. They do run out pretty quick because they're not expensive as a company. They're $400, I think, US. You just buy one essentially. But it is tethered. So it is a different experience than the HoloLens. It is not the same, but it's the same platform. And I think this is, no one's going to spend $3,000 on that device, right? It's just not going to happen. All right. So, do you want to have a look at what this does? A bit more fun? Yeah? Just for a few minutes? Well, I will. So, here's our little developer portal again. And I'll just show you this. This is the cool bit, if you haven't seen this before. Is he on? Hello? It goes to sleep pretty quick. So battery life is usually a question I get. Like, what's the battery life on? Because it's, it's not tethered. 2 to 3 hours-ish, usually. There we go. Okay, so in here under mixed reality capture, I can do a live preview. And of course it'll work first time. And you can now see what I see. Hey. So there's a little bit of a lag on it. You can see when I turn my head, it's not quite in real time. So here's my start menu. I'll try and keep my head still so you don't throw up. Again, the bloom again. I can tap on things here, so I can go into the start menu just like any other start menu. I can go up and down. See, I'm moving my head to control the mouse, right? And here's apps like any other Windows 10 device. Holograms, place that there. This is always kind of a fun one. So then usually, anyone wants a kitten? Yeah, I think we'll put a kitten down here. So there you go, you can have a kitten. How about that? Aw, isn't it lovely? There you go, you can have a kitten. So that's kind of fun, right? Yeah, oh, here, he likes you stroking him. There you go. So he's animated and everything. There's no sound. Have we got no sound again?
No, it's the same.
Oh, it is, okay. It's just because I hear it here, right? And I hear it before you, so it's a bit weird. We'll just shut him up again. There you go. Here. You can take that home. You can keep it. So you get the idea. As I click around here, it's going to map it as well. You can see all the triangle and all that. That's when it's mapping the room. Now I've cheated a little bit again, and over here is RoboRaid. I don't know if anyone's ever tried RoboRaid, but
Systems online. Shields engaged. They'll be here any second.
so you can hear that?
Brace yourself.
Is there any sound on? So you see they come out the wall here, right? So there's robots coming out the wall, and I can walk around it. I've got to shoot this dude. There you go. And they crawl on the wall because they know where all the walls are, right? So no, there's a bit that I haven't mapped. I think there's a wall there. But I can shoot the walls as well and everything. There's holes in the walls. So then I can look through the hole, like in here, and it kind of gives you that, and it's super stable. Like it might be a bit jerky on the video, but it's really, really stable on the device. There you go. And we just keep shooting stuff, and there's holes in the walls and everything. Yeah, you get the idea? So I always show that demo. I always show RoboRaid because it's one of the best examples that you can quickly convey what mixed reality is. Right? Oh, hello. I still don't think that's a gaming device. I really don't. But right now, there's your kitten. Look. Right now, the best example, the best showcase of mixed reality are games that you can get freely. Like there's lots of companies that are doing really, really, really cool stuff, such as you have ThyssenKrupp, I think they're called. It's a German company, elevator company. Yeah, that one. But I said in German, no. And they have this showcase, you can look it up on YouTube, that shows you a bunch of stairs, and they want to install one of those disable elevators for the stairs, right? If you can't walk up the stairs. And they map the whole thing. They got this special like kind of mapping tool, so a little thing that you can use as a guide, so it's more accurate. But essentially, they map the staircase and build the elevator holographically, show it to the customer, say, hey, is this what you wanted? And then adjust or whatever they need to, and then send it off to production. Right, the hologram itself is the 3D model that they use to produce the actual device or the production thing for. And that, to me, is just like, whoa, oh man, you just cut out the whole layer of, oh, we need to come back and remeasure, and oh, this wasn't quite what I wanted, and I didn't think that was going to go there, and all those questions, right, it's just gone. So stuff like that, I think that's much better, especially for a $3,000 device. No one's going to buy a gaming device for $3,000, right? But here we are. All right, so the usual thing that I normally do at the end, because it's not that interesting, but there we go. I'm me. I'm Microsoft MVP, which means they give me stickers. I get lots of stickers that says MVP, and I can give them to people or use them. I have a blog as anybody else, but I do write about some of these things and many other things. I'm doing a robot talk tomorrow, a little guy called Cosmo, which is actually a guy I met here last year, showed me this Cosmo thing at a talk, and now I'm kind of stolen his idea and doing a talk on it. Like, it's really cool. Little robot has emotions. Tomorrow afternoon. Just a fun talk. I have run a podcast with a guy I've never met who lives in Alaska. And he's the pain, obviously, because I'm the Dane. Called The Dane and the Pain. Look it up if you want to listen. It's just pretty good fun. I do amazing jokes on there. Really good jokes. And I have, of course, a Pluralsight course as well on HoloLens development. Feel free to check it out. And if you haven't heard of PopConf, that's tomorrow night. After the event, it's like the after party. It's 10 talks, I think, of 5 minutes with slides that progress automatically, and you just got to keep up. Not recorded, highly inappropriate, politically incorrect, all that stuff. Very good fun. But yeah, go there if you want to come along. And that's all I had. Thanks, guys.